To look forward to in the new year, 5 lunar eclipses, including one next month that's being touted as the Super Blood Wolf Moon Eclipse. Super because the moon will be at its closest position to the Earth. Blood because the moon's alignment with the sun will make it appear red. And wolf because it's happening in January, where the first full moon of the year is called the wolf moon. It is said that's because the Native American tribes would say the wolves would howl more overnight. So there you have it.
A little history lesson.
Mark your calendar. January 21st for the wolf moon. Should be some great moon watching and lunar watching this next year.
We'll see you back here at 4 o'clock. More news now from Washington.
Leadership from both sides of the aisle in Congress out of town. 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. President Trump is tweeting from the White House that Democrats need to give him a border wall before reopening the government.
Plus, the sheriff of the California town mourning the death of a police officer speaks out today against his state sanctuary laws protecting illegal aliens, including the man accused of the crime.
And countdown to 2019, the Big Apple ready to usher in New Year's tomorrow night. We'll go behind the scenes on the massive security effort. New Speaker of the House coming in just a couple of days. A lot of news before the new year. I'm Leland Vittert.
And I'm Kristen Fisher. Well, it is now day 9 of this partial government shutdown with still no deal in sight. And Democrats and Republicans are continuing to blame each other. Garrett Tenney joins us now. And Garrett, you know, it certainly sounds like this shutdown is going to continue for quite some time.
Yeah, not any major progress, but maybe just a little. You got to remember, most of Congress went home for the holidays and left it up to party leaders to negotiate a deal. The problem is those negotiations, the full-scale negotiations like you typically see during a shutdown, those haven't been happening. Behind the scenes, though, a number of lawmakers in both parties have been meeting to try and work out a deal to end the shutdown. The proposals so far include a combination of funding for the wall, a fix for DACA, and a number of other immigration provisions that Democrats could support. The idea or the hope is that those additions could be enough to get a deal, but that was also the hope with a bipartisan immigration deal that President Trump nixed last year. And today on Face the Nation, Senator Jon Tester wasn't optimistic this time around would be any different.
I think we've been here before. I was in the room when the president said, if Congress passes something, I'm going to sign it. And then he moved back away from that. And so I think ultimately, in the end, we do need comprehensive immigration reform. There's no doubt about that, Margaret. But in the end, we need to know what the president wants, and hopefully he'll stick to it.
Senator Lindsey Graham is one of the lawmakers working behind the scenes to come up with a deal. But on State of the Union, he said the problem right now is that Democratic leaders aren't interested in negotiating or trying to reach a compromise at all.
The bottom line is they want Trump to lose more than they want the country to win, I fear. At the end of the day, there's a deal to be had, but everybody's changing their position here, and most Americans are pretty tired of it. So to my Democratic friends, there'll never be a deal without wall funding. And many Republicans are going to offer something as an incentive to vote for wall funding that you have supported in the past.
And lawmakers are expecting negotiations will pick up later this week once the new Congress begins. Until then, the shutdown will drag on. And of course, the finger pointing across the aisle will continue.
Yeah, and it is still so quiet just across the street on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much, Garrett Tenney.
Got it.
Leland.
All right, and with that, for a little bit more of the finger pointing, we bring in Illinois Congressman Raj Krishnamurthy from Chicago. Nice to see you, sir. Appreciate it. You heard Lindsey Graham there. He said there's never going to be a deal without wall funding. And we hear from leaders on your side of the aisle that there's never going to be wall funding if you want a deal. So it seems as though we're going to still be at an impasse for a while.
Unfortunately, that's the case right now. But what we see in poll after poll after poll is that the American people, a majority of them, do not want a wall, and an even greater majority don't want the government to be shut down because of the demand for wall funding.
Well, it seems as though a vast majority of Americans, though, feel as though we have an immigration crisis on the border. Call it what you want. They want the border secure.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. I think that there are a lot of people in Congress on both sides of the aisle who are, well, as the GAO just recently explained to us in their report, it's very ineffective because we already have sections of the border with walls, and gangs go over them, they tunnel underneath, they go around, and drugs actually come right through the checkpoints.
That seems like a point to build a better wall, not to have them. And if somebody keeps coming in, you breaking down your front door, you don't say, I don't need a front door. You say, maybe I should put more locks on it, right?
Well, I think the reason why the American people don't want a wall is in part because of what Republican Will Hurd, who has much of the border in his own district, says, which is that it hurts the local. Well, again, I think the reason why the majority of the American people don't want a wall but do want some physical barriers is because a wall is just ineffective and it hurts America rather than helps it. And hurts our
let's make sure,
trying to control illegal immigration.
Let's deal with the same words here and make sure they mean the same things to both of us. When you say a wall won't work, you're saying a wall from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean along the Mexican border. We can stipulate, and reasonable people could agree, that there are places where a large physical barrier, by whatever name, needs to be on the border, correct?
That's actually the case right now.
Right, and one could stipulate that there needs to be more money to improve that physical barrier to your point, so the gangs don't go around it, above it, and over it, and under it.
And well, I think that as Customs and Border Patrol agents have reported to John Kelly, who gave an interview this morning or this weekend to The Hill, basically they don't want a wall from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. They want more money for manpower as well as technology. And right now, the government is shut down.
Right. But
these Border Patrol agents aren't even being paid.
Congressman, you're talking about needing a lot more than $1.3 billion to do all the things that you just talked about, and still Democrats aren't offering more than that.
Well, I think that we should compromise with regard to the amount of funding for this type of technology and manpower. Absolutely.
Maybe we can make a deal here. We got a guy from the other side of the aisle coming up here in a minute with Kristen. Toss out a number and we'll see what he says.
Well, I think that it all depends. How long is the funding? Is it for a year or is it just 2 months?
What are we
talking about in terms of the needs of the Customs and Border Patrol agents?
Okay, well,
I want to hear from DHS and the people who are actually on the ground. But above all, we got to open the government, Leland. We got to open the government. That's what the American people want.
So there's no offer. There's no number other than 1.3.
I'm sorry?
Give a number that you'd support higher than 1.3 billion.
Well, I think that there are various numbers, 1.6, 1.7, 2.0. I don't know what the right number is because I want to hear from the Customs and Border Patrol agents. But above all, we got to pay them right now. If we really believe in border security, we can't have them work without pay, which is what's happening right now.
All right. Congressman, appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Congressman Krishnamurthy out of Chicago. Enjoy your New Year, sir. All the best.
Yes, sir. Happy New Year.
All right, Kristen. Good luck on getting a little more specifics here.
So let's hear from the other side of the aisle. We've got Republican Indiana Congressman Todd Rokita. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Kristen.
You just heard from the Democratic congressman. He did not give a hard dollar amount in terms of where he might be willing to compromise. Are you willing to give one?
Listen, I think we already gave on. I mean, we've compromised. The president's compromised. It's $25 billion needed to put the wall where it's needed along the border, which isn't the entire border, but where it's needed, it's going to be $25 billion. That's the latest estimate. We have moved off that, Kristen, from $25 billion to a simple $5 billion. And I have to tell you, just as a member of the Budget Committee, although $5 billion is a tremendous amount of money, in budgetary terms, where we spend $4 trillion a year, this is this much. The idea that a Democrat like my friend who was just on, who loves to spend money every chance he gets, now has a problem, means this is just about politics.
Well, since you bring up budgetary concerns and we want to talk specific dollar amounts, you know, the White House started at $5 billion. They reportedly went down to about 2.5. Democrats went from 1.6 to 1.3. I mean, when you really look at the math, 1.3 and 2.5 billion dollars, while a big number, isn't all that huge in terms of Washington. So are we really willing to continue to keep the government shut down over just a small amount of money?
Well, it is budgetary, from a budgetary standpoint, it is a ridiculously small amount of money. Right. You're exactly right. And why we're quibbling about this both sides is beyond me, because the Democrats have all voted for more funding for the wall before. It's just about denying the president any kind of accomplishment. And let's be honest, this is his big campaign promise, and they are trying to deny that. But President Trump, like we're seeing with China in his negotiation, is going to out-negotiate the Democrats here if we all stick together. And by all, I mean my squishy Republican friends, too. We have got to stick together. This isn't about 25% of the government being closed, Kristen. Look, we just had it closed for 2 weeks. No one really noticed.
Well, it's the holidays.
True, and no one's going to notice anything because it's 25% of the government that's closed right now is all non-essential employees anyway.
So it sounds like you're willing to dig in and just keep the government shut down for as long as it takes?
For as long as it takes, because the American people want this. This is what they voted the president into office for. This is what they voted for Republicans for. This is only common sense. It's sane. Every sovereign nation on the face of the earth, Kristen, gets to do this. Why shouldn't we?
So do you want President Trump to hold the line on his border wall at all cost? Or is there any room where you would want him to negotiate?
Sure. I mean, as long as we have forward movement, that takes care of the next fiscal year, right? We can only we're only talking about a fiscal deal.
Do you want President Trump to budge on his wall?
Well, I mean, if there's other ways to achieve it, sure, we're happy to listen. But the fact of the matter is, we need this wall. That is the point. Ask the state of Israel, ask the nation of Israel if they think a wall is effective. They do, because it is. And the Democrats even know it's effective. It's just about denying the president this. He shouldn't budge. He shouldn't give in, because the people that voted for him, the people that support him, which are a majority of the people in this nation, understand that we need to be sovereign. We need a wall, and this is the chance to get it done.
So let me ask you this. Senator Lindsey Graham was just on CNN this morning, and he proposed $5 billion for the wall and border security, plus the Bridge Act, which is a 3-year one-time renewable work permit for all of the Dreamers. Is that something that you would support?
You know, that's something I would support, you know, if I'll see the details of it. But we're not going to give away the store for $5 billion either. You know, if they want some bigger, grander deal, that's much more than $5 billion. That's a guarantee that the wall will be completed. Everything else will be done as well. Happy to have all those discussions. It's long overdue. But the bottom line is, any kind of victory the Democrats will want to deny, and that's why the American people here are so important. Not just your viewers, but all Americans chiming in with their congressmen, letting folks know that this is important. Right? There's a caravan of illegal aliens at the border. Officer in California was just killed by another illegal immigrant. So this is very real, and the people care about this.
I want to ask you something about what President Trump tweeted yesterday. He tweeted that he essentially blamed the deaths of those 2 migrant children who died while in U.S. custody. He blamed them on Democrats. Do you blame Democrats for those children's death?
I blame the Democrats. I blame anybody who thinks for political reasons that we don't need a wall. We do, because not having a wall is inviting these people, along with their children, to make a very dangerous journey. That is inhumane. The most humane thing we can do is build a wall and send the correct message that there is not, don't take the journey, don't make the journey, it's too dangerous, you're going to get hurt. But when we say, come across our open borders, we're not a sovereign nation, like the Democrats do, that was your question, like they do, then you invite this kind of trouble.
But even though President Trump controls the White House and Republicans control both chambers of Congress, it's still the Democrats' fault, these 2 children's deaths.
The reason we're sitting here on our government shutdown is because we don't have 60 votes in the Senate. I mean, so as long as that rule stays, and we're not willing to go to a simple majority vote in the Senate, then it's not the Republicans' fault. It's Chuck Schumer holding this up.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your insight, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Leland. And guys, just stick around after our show for Fox News Sunday, because Sandra Smith, she's in for Chris Wallace, and she has an exclusive interview with House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. Don't want to miss that.
Back to what you all were talking about on the border, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen spent about 2 hours with Border Patrol authorities during a trip to Yuma, Arizona on Saturday. Nielsen's visit was prompted by the deaths of those 2 migrant children while in ICE custody. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, as you just heard, tied the deaths of those children into the overall debate on border security.
We are allowing these people to take their children on a perilous journey without correcting the falsities. They're being promised something that people can simply not deliver upon.
Kellyanne, I want to talk about
people to subject these children to perilous journeys.
All right, Nielsen's visit to Yuma marks her 16th stop at the U.S.-Mexico border.
The arrest of an illegal immigrant and the shooting death of a California police officer has sparked new debate about the state sanctuary laws. Our Jeff Paul joins us live with more. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Kristen. Yeah. They say he was not really so much about everything else. It was a senseless tragedy. It could have been prevented. But unfortunately, we're here today having this conversation because it was not prevented.
A total of 8 people are now in custody after being arrested in connection with this case. The first most prominent arrest being that of Gustavo Perez Arriaga. He's the man who authorities say shot and killed Corporal Singh after being pulled over on suspicion of DUI. Then there are 7 other people, including the suspect's 2 brothers and girlfriend, who were arrested accused of trying to help Arriaga. Now, following the developments, Newman Police Chief Randy Richardson spoke about losing one of his finest officers, one of just 12 in the department.
It's a tremendous blow. We have good days, we have bad days. Not everybody's having them at the same time. We've had incredible support from other law enforcement agencies stepping in when we need it to cover our streets because we're not able to handle those shifts. It's been a tough few days.
Now, Corporal Singh leaves behind a wife and 5-month-old son. The suspect, meanwhile, is expected in court on Wednesday. Kristen?
Yeah, and here you have an immigrant who came to the country legally, killed by somebody who came into the country illegally. It's such a sad story. Jeff Paul, thank you. Leland.
I'm going to keep watching this. A healthcare worker in Omaha, Nebraska has been isolated after possible exposure to Ebola. The person has not been identified. They arrived at the University of Nebraska Medical Center on Saturday. They're going to be monitored for 2 weeks. The center says the person may have come into contact with the virus while providing medical assistance in the Congo, but currently is not showing any symptoms. Watch that.
Coming up, a deadly helicopter crash caught on tape. Investigators now searching for answers. Plus, all eyes on the markets tomorrow, the last day of trading in 2018, following days of sharp swings on Wall Street, and what 2019 holds for the Mueller investigation. President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has a blunt message for the independent counsel.
My ultimatum is put up or shut up, Bob. I mean, you know, what do you have?
With one trading day left before the markets close for the year, this December has been anything but typical. Stocks are having their worst December since the Great Depression, and analysts say stock market volatility isn't disappearing anytime soon. So for more insight, let's dig into this with Fox Business Network correspondent and economist Christina Partsinevelos. Christina, thanks for coming on to make sense of all this madness. Last week was just insane. So what are you going to be watching for tomorrow on this last day of trading in 2018? What do you expect?
I wish I could, take out my crystal ball and be really accurate with that. But like you mentioned, the volatility was ridiculous, just covering it here and just in New York City on the New York City Stock Exchange floor. And you saw this swing, negative 653 points on Monday, worst Christmas Eve ever. And then the most positive swing on the upside on the Wednesday. So there's all of this confusion and this volatility. What's happening and what should we expect going forward? Investors right now are jittery, and that's causing volatility in the markets. Investors don't see the stability that they need. And so that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of them buy and sell just on a whim from certain headlines. You have algorithms that are playing a big role too. So yes, we do have another trading day on Monday. The big question is, will we have this worst December ever? The expectation from a lot of the notes right now is that yes, we're going to see continued volatility. However, today there was some news coming out of China. The Chinese Foreign Affairs Minister saying that they're going to be working with the United States on trade. So there's one factor that could add to some stability, right? Some type of truce between both countries.
So you've got this trade war with China, tariffs, fear of a recession, all this volatility in Washington. What other contributing factors are there to what was just a ridiculous week last week? Help us understand the why.
Yeah, the why. Actually, the government shutdown, I wouldn't say plays that major of a role, other than the fact that maybe the media coverage now is focusing more on the markets than what's going on at the White House or in Washington. So when you're focusing more on the markets, you're contributing to that volatility, especially with retail investors who are working from home. It's a lot to do also with interest rates going higher, or the fact that you have a 10-year bond, for a government bond, that is not giving as much of a return compared to a 2-year bond. So you're seeing this flattening of the yield spread between both. And that's concerning because the moment the return on a 10-year bond falls below a 2-year, so it's not as valuable to buy a longer bond, that usually is a sign that a recession is coming. So there's a lot of factors, instability, like I said, with trade war, even within the White House. If you bring up the fact that there's just conflicting messages coming from different people being fired or quitting, Jay Powell, the chairman Fed, what's happening with him, that adds to just the jitteriness of investors.
Well, and since you bring up Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, I want to get your take on the president's blistering criticism of him. I mean, he blames a lot of this on the fact that the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 4 times this year. Does the president have a point?
If you consider, yes, the hikes are quite a bit just over the last little while, but historically, interest rates are really low. And so you have this hike right now, just above 2%. That's not going to inhibit growth in the economy. The big question is going into 2019, will we have 2 more hikes? So yes, there's concerns, but historically, we've taken on a lot of debt as of yet. A lot of consumers, a lot of Americans have more debt in their household. Corporate debt has increased. Government debt is really, really high. And so when you have these interest rates start to climb higher, it makes it more expensive for everyone to pay back that debt. And for me, that is a big point of concern heading into 2019.
And what about for folks at home? What does all this market volatility mean for their 401ks?
Well, I think it's never a good, if you're just, you're not paying that much attention to the markets, don't follow the day-to-day movements, because historically that doesn't help or benefit your 401k. If anything, focus on maybe rebalancing if you are concerned. Get some more of the dividend-paying stocks. Those usually yield a better return in times of times of economic roughness, I guess you could say. Some people say focus on some of the less overvalued stocks. So move out of technology, go into utilities. Some people like Dollar Tree, for example, dollar stores, because they usually do well in times of lower periods or recessions. So these are ways to rebalance commodities, some of them too. But honestly, right now, I think we are headed for definitely more volatility. But if you don't pay attention to the markets every single minute of every single day, and you're not trading every day, just take a step back and maybe have a discussion with your whoever's handling your money that maybe you should rebalance. But don't worry too much.
All good points. Economic roughness. I like that. Christina Partsinevelos, thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Leland.
Still ahead, how hackers stopped the presses at 2 major American newspapers, and Chief of Staff John Kelly's exit interview, sending the White House into damage control on the last Sunday of 2018. Ellison Barber just on the lower right-hand part of that screen on the North Lawn. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Leland. Yeah, is it a wall? Is it not a wall? Does it even matter? It is the second week of the partial government shutdown. We'll look at all the questions right now, just after this. John Kelly says the president is not actually asking for a wall. Kelly says they moved on from that after speaking with Customs and Border Protection agents who are working along the U.S.-Mexico border because, quote, they said, well, we need a physical barrier in certain places. We need technology across the board, and we need more people. In an exclusive interview with the Los Angeles Times, Kelly then went on to say, quote, the president still says wall. Oftentimes, frankly, he'll say barrier or fencing. Now he's tended towards steel slats, but we left a solid concrete wall early on in the administration when we asked people what they needed and where they needed it. White House officials say Democrats know exactly what the president is asking for and accuse them of playing word games of silly semantics. All of this back and forth continues. As all of this back and forth continues, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, is also speaking out about the special counsel's Russia probe, telling Robert Mueller that it is time to put up or shut up.
I was with Donald Trump day in and day out for the last 4 months of the campaign. He was as surprised as I was about the WikiLeaks disclosures, sometimes surprised to the extent of, oh my God, did they really say that?
The special counsel investigation has led to nearly 36 indictments, among others. That list includes 5 former Trump advisors and 26 Russian nationals. President Trump's longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, was sentenced in the Southern District of New York for campaign finance violations, tax evasion, and lying to Congress. In a sentencing memo, Mueller's team told the court Cohen provided information that is helpful to the Russia probe, including what they described as useful information concerning certain discrete Russia-related matters core to the special counsel's investigation. Kristen.
Ellison Barber, live at the White House. Thank you. Leland.
All right, we'll bring in Robert Driscoll of past DOJ fame, and also the attorney for Maria Butina, the Russian agent who just pled out. Get a little more insight from you on this. Rudy Giuliani, is the president's defense attorney. He can sort of want whatever he wants from Robert Mueller, but can't really force the hand, can he?
Yeah, I'm reminded by, I think it was Kelly who said, the enemy gets a vote as to when the war ends. He can want it, but he's not really in control. It'll end when Mueller says it ends.
This is Rudy Giuliani also this morning on Fox and Friends, sort of issuing the ultimatum. Take a listen. We'll get your thoughts.
My ultimatum is put up or shut up, Bob. I mean, what do you have? There are those of us who believe you don't have anything on collusion. And by the way, if you did, it's not a crime. So what the heck are you doing? Do you have anything that shows the President of the United States was involved in a conspiracy to hack the DNC with Russia? Of course you don't.
Have you seen anything?
I mean, he's right from a public perspective, but that's kind of meaningless because you don't know what Mueller has. He's doing what a good defense lawyer would do. He's trying to press for the end of the case. But I mean, he's, in some sense, it's a bluff because he doesn't know what Mueller has. So he's just saying, you don't have anything, I haven't seen anything, and come up with it. And Mueller may or Mueller may not.
One thing that Mueller has, at least appears to have been very strategic in, number one, is not leaking out of his office. It's unbelievable how tight they have kept things. But two, there are all these little crumbs in all of these filings, much of which are redacted, but then there's these key points. How close does it appear to you that Mueller has gotten to the inner circle of Trump world in this sense?
It is very hard to judge that. And I think that lawyers who do are at great peril because this case isn't going to end in an indictment of the president, as we know, because you can't indict the president under DOJ rules. And where it's going to end in a report, a lot of the tea leaves we would normally read, you can't read in this case. So, for example, the fact that people are having sentencings usually wouldn't sentence cooperators until they were done cooperating in a trial. So in a normal case, you'd say, well, they're sentencing the cooperators, the principal's off the hook, but you can't conclude that here because the end result may be a report to Congress, not an indictment in a trial. He may not need any, Flynn or Manafort or anyone to testify at a trial. They just may need their statements in a report. So it's very hard to judge the normal, and I think a lot of the kind of classic analysis that goes on misses that point, that Mueller's doing a very different task here. He's finishing a report, not necessarily leading to an indictment.
It seems as though it's very clear he's still in the evidence gathering stage. We know about this Supreme Court case about which there is unbelievable secrecy, sealed subpoenas, and then clearing floors of courthouses when they have arguments about it, and now written arguments due to the Supreme Court tomorrow. Is there anything to read into that?
Again, it's impossible other than speculation. I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind is appellate courts, particularly the Supreme Court, are much more interested in jurisdictional issues than either the public or lower courts. And so when you have a foreign government and a foreign-owned entity, there's a question of whether there's U.S. jurisdiction. Whatever was in that briefing, Chief Justice Roberts saw something that caught his eye and wants to hear a little bit more. But I think it's hard to know whether that's a banking issue or whether it's something else.
Either way, it does show you, though, that this isn't over yet, right? I mean, this seems to indicate the opposite of what Rudy Giuliani's Christmas wish is.
Right. I mean, there's still clearly some threads to pursue. Some things are hinting that it could be over in the medium term. It'll be 2 years in March, I think. That may be a goal that a special prosecutor might set. But I just don't think you can. I mean, there's still active litigation going on because obviously, if these documents get turned over from country A, what's in them, and where does that lead?
All right, we may not even know whether they get turned over or not, considering how much secrecy surrounds that. All right, arguments due, I think it's by 5 p.m. tomorrow, so we'll see what is unsealed on that. Mr. Driscoll, always good to see you, Counselor.
Good to see you.
All right, Kristen.
Still ahead, focusing on 2020. Several potential Democratic hopefuls are hinting at a run. We'll tell you how voters are responding. And preparing for the big ball drop, how New Year's Eve organizers are getting ready to keep the big party in Times Square safe. Printing process for several outlets, including the LA Times and the Chicago Tribune. The attack has been reported to the FBI, but the paper's parent companies say Sunday deliveries of some papers may have been impacted.
Big moves expected in the first few weeks of 2019 by potential 2020 candidates jockeying for position. Perhaps this is a preview. Last night, Elizabeth Warren igniting more speculation by changing her campaign Twitter handle from @Elizabeth4MA to a much more generic @EWarren. She's not the only Dem on the list. Of course, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, just to name a few. It is a rather large list, as you can see there, of potential hopefuls. To weigh in on those, Chip Franklin out of San Diego, Jeff Creer out of New Orleans. Gentlemen, nice to have you with us. Chip, we will start with you on the left. Elizabeth Warren changing this. Anybody really all that surprised that she might be getting in?
I don't think so. I think she's been hinting at this for a while. Yeah. And the Native American thing aside, obviously she has all of the criteria that you'd want. She's extremely passionate about the things that matter to Democrats. Well, let me just say liberals, I should say right now. I mean, I differ from some of my Democratic friends because I believe this is not about compromise in 2020. Climate change, health care, income inequality. This is a time for people like Elizabeth Warren, like Kamala Harris, like Beto O'Rourke, even Joe Biden, to step forward and show the American people that not only are we not Trump, but we stand for liberal issues that will affect the future of not just our children, but our grandchildren.
All right, so we look at who the base is most excited about, put up top Dems who people are excited about. We have this recent poll that just came out. By the way, the people are most excited, Chip, about, quote, someone new. 59% saying that, 53% the top name going to Joe Biden in terms of people they are excited about. Jeff, I'll flip it around for you. Who should Republicans be most excited about on this list to run against?
Hey, Leland, I think all of them are great to run against. I think Elizabeth Warren had really made a joke of herself with this whole DNA controversy. I think Joe Biden is a has-been. I think the one person that may have some traction is Kamala Harris, who I think could be the one that Republicans might be facing in 2020. But all these retreads, Bernie Sanders and Hillary and Joe Biden, I mean, I hope they run because I think they'll be easily beatable. The Democrats' only chance is someone new and fresh, someone that can really attract those Rust Belt states that they lost 2 years ago.
Chip, you know Kamala Harris well out in California. She didn't top the most excited list, should she?
Yeah, well, she's a former prosecutor. You saw her on the hearings with Kavanaugh. She stands her own. She stands her ground. She's smart people. And, you know, I do find it ironic, though, that Trump supporters, you know, the irony is so thick that they would be criticizing Democratic candidates, seeing as how their sociopath numbers are dropping every single day.
I'm not sure
I think we're going to be talking.
I haven't seen the numbers fall.
Listen,
every day, but
Leland,
okay.
Let me just interject here. Last time you had a Republican incumbent defeated, it was with a centrist Democrat named Bill Clinton. There's no real centrist on this list. They're all far-left liberals. They're so far left, they've left America. I don't see any of these people really being serious contenders for the presidency, maybe except Kamala Harris. All of them, I think, are way far to the left. You need somebody in the middle that can attract those states that the Democrats lost in 2016. Yeah. I don't see these people being able to win back those Rust Belt states.
Chip, give me that name. Who is that? Who fits Jeff's mold?
Well, Jeff's mold is not the mold that I'm looking for. If you're talking about Kamala Harris or Beto O'Rourke, it'd be a great joke. I think Joe Biden has some great ideas. He's always been left of center and smart, a smart left of center. So Biden on the top of a ticket, I wouldn't have a problem with. Kamala Harris or Kamala Harris on the top of a ticket. But look, this is again,
Jeff's getting excited. I almost see him licking his chops there, like he's ready to get some barbecue or something.
No, I mean, listen. Remember the James Carville formula, Leland. It's the economy, stupid. Remember the formula that beat Jimmy Carter. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? If President Trump has a strong economy, he's going to win re-election. And look at the economy right now. Low unemployment, high consumer confidence. Everything, I think, is pointing toward high GDP growth going forward. We've got a good economy.
All right, Chip, you got the first word. That means that Jeff gets the last. The good news, though, is that we're still about 2 years until November 2020. So we have time to have you guys back and discuss this again many, many times over. We'll see you then, fellas. Happy New Year.
Good deal.
Thanks, guys.
Happy New Year.
All right, Kristen.
Well, we may be talking about 2020, but we're still getting ready to ring in 2019. at Times Square. Jackie Heinrich has a live look at how organizers are preparing for the biggest party of the night. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, Kristen, it's a tradition 112 years running, so it has to go off without a hitch. Organizers are testing the ball drop mechanism and, of course, the 32,000 lights that 1 billion people worldwide will be watching tomorrow night. We're giving you a backstage pass to all the preparations.
The biggest party of the year in Times Square is tomorrow night, and event organizers and New York City police are working around the clock to make sure everything's in place to ring in 2019 safely. Jackie Heinrich is live in Times Square with more on the big preparations. Jackie, how's it looking? Are they ready?
They are so ready. There are 25,000 balloons in that building up there behind me, and more than 3,000 pounds of confetti ready to drop on the crowd tomorrow night. Of course, the ball is also ready to drop. But there are a lot of preparations going on that you can't see that are going to keep everyone in this crowd safe. We're going to show you the fun stuff first, though. The New Year's Eve tradition is running 112 years strong, so everything's got to go off without a hitch. This morning, organizers tested the ball drop mechanism and the 32,000 lights that more than 1 billion people will be watching on TV tomorrow night. This thing is huge. The current New Year's Eve ball weighs nearly 12,000 pounds. It's 12 feet in diameter, and it's topped with more than 2,500 Waterford crystals. Now, put this in perspective. The first New Year's Eve ball was made of iron and wood and weighed about 500 pounds, and it had about 125-watt light bulbs put on it. We've come a long way since 1907. Of course, half the preparation is in the security. Thousands of NYPD officers will be deployed. More than 200 blocker vehicles are in place around intersections here. Sniper teams are stationed on rooftops, and for the first time, NYPD is using drones to back up more than 1,200 security cameras. They're also using odor pursuit canines for the first time. Right now, there are no credible threats against the event, but intelligence analysts and counterterrorism teams are working around the clock.
So you will see a lot of officers. You'll see a lot of officers with a lot of gear and long guns and the kinds of weaponry needed for securing such a huge event. There obviously will be measures you won't see as well.
Of course, the city is also preparing for the massive cleanup effort that will follow. Last year, city workers cleared out more than 57 tons of debris from Times Square after the festivities ended. Part of that cleanup is, of course, the confetti. The city drops about 1.5 tons on the crowd. Now, it's pretty cool to be out here. There are only 2 years in history since this all began. The ball drop didn't happen. That was during World War II, during the dim out in 1942 and 1943. So 2019, we are all set to go and very excited out here in Times Square. Kristen?
Jackie Heinrich, thank you. And don't forget, Fox News is your place to ring in the new year. An all-American New Year starts at 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night, hosted by Griff Jenkins and Carly Shimkus. Then Kennedy and Pete Hegseth take over at 10 p.m. Eastern. All right, Leland, you have a choice. You're going to be in New York tomorrow night for New Year's Eve. So if you were to choose Times Square, you have to stand there for hours to watch the ball drop, or you
Anywhere
can watch
else?
the NASA New Horizons probe flyby.
Well,
What's it going to be?
Only by virtue of the fact that it is going to be raining in Times Square tomorrow night. The chance of rain, I just looked it up, is 100%. So
you're going to go with the flyby.
I'm going to go with the flyby. I just having to tell you that.
I have been victorious. I have persuaded you to watch the flyby.
We'll text about it at midnight. Where's the lunar probe now?
I have no doubt. Well, that's all for us here in Washington. Fox News Sunday is coming up next.
Sandra Smith is in there. Great lineup, including Kellyanne Conway, who made a lot of news. Steve Scalise as well. We'll see you in 2019.